Hello, and welcome to The Connection. This podcast is about understanding and building the connection we have with others and with ourselves. I hope that through this podcast, you'll be able to have more joy and fulfillment in your life. I'm your host, Jared Hurst. So, last week was the very first episode I had where I did a video feed, a live video feed. In case you didn't catch that listening to the Spotify or the Apple Podcast version, I actually have video of myself doing this entire podcast. It's on YouTube if you're interested in seeing it in that format. If not, I'll continue to edit and put things up on Spotify. So this week, I want to talk with you a little bit about something that's started to make like a big difference in my life. And that concept is consistency and implementation. I know it doesn't sound like a really sexy topic. You're like, okay, Jared, yes, we need to be consistent, whatever. But I'm going to try and take like a different approach to that and try to show you how that is making a difference in my life and how it can make a difference in your life as well. You know, one of the reasons that it's important to be consistent is because it allows us to create a result over time. And I'll dive into that in a little more detail, but what I was having this issue where I've been obviously working a lot on myself over the last couple of years, like significant work and time and effort into changing my mind, the way that I act, the way that I relate to myself. All those things I've been trying to make a big difference in my life. And though I have had progress, I didn't feel like I was getting the progress that I wanted. And I recognized that it really came down to not taking enough action and not being consistent enough with that action. What I know that I've done, one of the things that I'm aware that I have been guilty of, is that I use learning and other distractions as a way to keep myself from taking action. You might be able to see that in your own life. You have times where you know that you want to make this drastic change in your life, that you want things to be different, but it can be really easy to find yourself, especially if you're a learner like me, keeping yourself from taking action by continually learning over and over and over again, because there's all these really cool new things to learn. And maybe learning isn't your form of distraction, but you probably will notice that when you're trying to take action and you're not getting the results you want, it's because you're using some form of distraction to keep yourself from actually taking the action. It's because you have a fear. And you're allowing that fear to create things in your environment that keep you safe without maybe even realizing what you're doing. So, one of the things that I found that helped me to start taking action is that it's consistency, but it's consistency not just in action, but consistency in thought. When we're consistent about managing our thoughts, then our thoughts help drive our actions. And then when in turn we are consistent with our actions feed our thoughts. And so it's this loop. We have this loop of action and thought. And the more we can be consistent on both sides of the circle, the more they continue to feed into each other and build momentum. So one thing I did is I started really managing my thoughts and then taking immediate action. So I'll give you an example. One thing that I struggle with is when I would try to make phone calls for work. It's one of the least favorite parts of my job, is that I call out and I talk to people that have signed up on our website and I say, hey, I'd love to help you find a house. And it's just not a really fun environment. I'm sure some of it is because my very first jobs were doing call centers. I would do outbound telemarketing, and I have a very unpleasant relationship with outbound calling because of that, because people are not excited to talk with you. So what I've had to do is I have to correct my thoughts and make sure that my thoughts are focused in a way so that I put a positive meaning behind the action I'm about to take, and then I take immediate action before those intrusive thoughts can come back in. It's just like last week when we were talking about prediction. My mind has predicted that there's going to be a negative result from making those calls, and it's always so much easier to make those calls once I've done a few of them. So it's creating this positive mindset in my head to get me to do the first call, and then taking that call right away, and then getting into action, and then feeding that loop. So that's one thing. The other thing outside of consistent thoughts and actions is I have understood that I need to embrace difficult things and hard things. I am somebody that if you look at my life, I have got minky blankets, I've got comfy clothes, I've always been a creature of comfort, and I've used that as an excuse through a lot of my life to say, well, I'm just a comfortable person. It's like, well, no. Happiness comes in growth, and growth requires doing difficult things that are outside of our comfort zone. My friend Henry Amar loves to say that it's not a comfort zone, because who is actually comfortable in their comfort zone? It's your safety zone. It's the place where you feel safe, but it doesn't necessarily bring you fulfillment, and it doesn't necessarily bring you comfort. So you have to push the boundaries of those things. So embracing that things are going to be hard and that things are going to be difficult was a big step in my mental progression, where I said, you know what? Life is going to be hard. Things are going to be difficult, and I need to stop trying to make them easy. I just need to recognize that there is going to be a level of challenge and difficulty to my life. And then the other thing is just deciding to change. Now, there's probably healthier ways to do this. I'm not saying this is an unhealthy way per se, but our mind, as I talked about in predictions, when we have a really strong emotion, those strong emotions wire our brain much faster than when we do not have a high amplitude emotion attached to it. When I have had times where I've been in a lot of pain, those have been times where I use that as a catalyst for change. And during that moment, I decide that I'm going to do something different. Because the pain of staying where I am is more painful than the pain of change and the difficulty of change. So I think that while there are other ways to do this, to make a decision, to make a conscious decision, some people I think are really great at this. Some people are just capable of saying, I'm going to do this, and then they do it. I usually need some type of a catalyst, like pain, like feeling challenged by somebody else. There's something external a lot of the times that comes along. And I know I had an episode, I can't remember which one it is, but where I talked about you can create your own catalysts. I think it had something to do with breakups or something along those lines. You can create an inciting incident, is what I talked about. And we can do that in our lives. If you go to a Tony Robbins event, he actually takes you through a process like this, where he creates a lot of pain in your past, your present, and your future around a certain behavior, so that way you can use all this pain that you create in your mind in order to use that as this catalyst for change. So making the decision to change. The great thing is about trying to change, about becoming consistent, is that our body and our mind adapt to what we give it. And I'll give you two examples. One is really obvious. You already are aware of it and you see it all the time. And that is working out, going to the gym. If I continue to give resistance to my muscles, then my body adapts to it. I lift a weight that I'm not capable of lifting, or I'm barely capable of lifting. And then what happens? My body breaks down those tissues, builds them up, and increases my strength so that I am able to take care of that weight. But if you have ever worked out before, you know that if you are not consistent with it, you will not build the strength. Your body adapts to consistent challenges. When you have challenges that are consistently there, your body adapts to it. And the same thing is true of your mind. Your mind will adapt to consistent challenges. And I'll give you a great example. They have found that willpower, our ability to do the things that we do not want to do, and our ability to resist the things that we do want. So saying no to the cookie and getting myself to go to the gym when I don't want to go to the gym, that is willpower, okay? And willpower is a specific portion of our brain. And what they've found is the more often you do things that you don't want to do, or resist things that you do want to do, the size of that portion of your brain will increase. The same way our muscles increase to give us more strength, our brain will change in order to give us more power to deal with what we're giving it consistently. And the great thing about both of those is that there is a direct correlation between the size of your muscles and your life expectancy. There is a direct correlation between the size of the willpower portion of your brain and your life expectancy. Both of those are scientifically proven. Now, I don't know if that applies to everything, but I have a sneaking suspicion that it does. That anything we give our body, anything that we give our mind consistently, we will adapt, and that those adaptations will actually have positive effects on our mental state and our physical state. I know I've read a study that has something to do with dementia and other mental illnesses and the use of our brains. So I know there's other stuff out there. I just couldn't quote everything to you off the top of my head. So consistency is awesome because consistency creates growth, and that growth has massive changes to our overall life, happiness, and everything else that we want. So my belief is that action needs to both be consistent, strategic, and simple. So when I say strategic, if I go to the gym and I don't know what I'm doing, I will not have the same results as if I have a trainer that shows me both a structure and a strategy that allows me to get the most out of my efforts. And that's the same thing that's true in business and life. I mean, you can make massive changes to your life when you model somebody else that has gone before you and had results, right? Like if you want to create a business, you go find somebody that created a successful business and then you follow them. If you want to increase your mind, you go find somebody that has a powerful mind and then you follow them. If you want to increase your body, you go and you find somebody that has a great body and then you follow them. That's what I'm trying to do. Is not only have I been making drastic changes to my life by following others, but then I'm taking the things that I'm learning from my process, because I understand that I was here and now I'm here and I want to be here. And I continue to study and track everything that I'm doing because I want to be able to pass that on to other people. I remember when I first started on this journey, I was so frustrated with the lack of knowledge that I could find out there. I would do searches and I felt like I could not find what I wanted in order to transform my life. And so I made a promise to myself that I would change my life, that I would remember how I did it, and that I would do what I could to help other people along that path. So have a strategy, have structure, be consistent with it, and keep it simple, because the more complex you make it, you're going to start giving up on it. That's why people go out and they get a personal trainer, because if I show up, all I have to do is show up and then do what I'm told to do. If I have to show up and I don't have somebody to hold me accountable, I don't have somebody there showing me what to do, it's easier for me to get frustrated. It's easier for me to give up on that goal that I have. So consistent action that is both strategic and simple. That's going to make massive changes in your life. So I believe that it's important that we look and see where are the areas that will give me the biggest return. There's a book in real estate. It is called The One Thing. And they talk about that most things can be broken down to one activity, and that one activity will drive 80% of your success. Now, I don't know if that's true of everything, but I do think it's important that if I am going to have something that I'm working on, I want to work on the thing that is going to give me the biggest result for my effort. And all this all melds together, and I'll show you how. There's this thing, it's called the 4 stages of competence. So the 4 stages of competence are, I'm going to read this to you really quick. Unconscious incompetence, unconscious competence, conscious incompetence, and conscious competence. Okay, that sounds like a tongue twister, right? But here's what it is. I'm going to give you an example. When I first started working on myself, I recognized that I had a tendency for catastrophic thinking. I am somebody that a lot of the times I will look at best and talking is hard. I look at best and worst case scenarios. And then what ended up happening is over time, I stopped looking at the best case scenarios and I just started looking at the worst case scenarios. I had trained my mind to look at a situation and come up with all the ways in which things wouldn't work out. And that is not good for you, right? That's not healthy. So at first, I was incompetent at having positive thoughts, and I wasn't even aware that I wasn't good at having positive thoughts. So I was unconscious, unaware, and incompetent, not very good at it. So then I recognized that I had this issue, so I had to keep training my mind over and over and over until I became consciously aware that I was incompetent. So like every time I would have this catastrophic thought, I'd be like, oh, there's that catastrophic thought again. I'm thinking in the negative. And so then I would try to correct it. And then eventually I moved to this part of the process where I was conscious and competent. Like I knew that I had an issue. I noticed it when I was doing it, and I started fixing it to the point that I was becoming competent at it. I was getting good at changing my thoughts into positive thoughts. But I had to make a conscious effort to do it. And then the last step is that you become competent at it and you don't even have to think about it. So you start off, you're not aware that you suck at something. Then you become aware that you suck at something. Then you get good at something, but you have to make a conscious effort in order to do it. And then eventually it becomes habit. And once it becomes habit and you do it well without having to think about it, you no longer have to make mental efforts in order to do it. And this is where habit stacking comes in. What you do is you look at your life and you say, where am I going to have the biggest bang for my buck? What is going to make the biggest changes in my life? I just recently did this. I said, this is what's going to move me the most in my business. This is what's going to move me the most in my career. This is what's going to move me the most in my everyday life and my mindset. So I have those 3 things, and I make a conscious effort to get better at that over and over and over again. And then eventually, I get to the point where I don't have to think about it. It becomes a habit, and I keep doing it. And I may have little reminders to make sure that I stay on track, that I don't lose where I'm at, and then all of a sudden digress and lose a habit. Because we've all lost a habit. You get in the habit of going to the gym. It becomes easy eventually. You go to the gym every day and you don't have to think about it, but then you make an excuse. You don't go for like a week, and all of a sudden you're way back here and you're having to go through this whole process of turning it back into a habit. So what I would say is figure out what's going to make the biggest impact in the area of your life that you want to change. Turn it into a habit through conscious repetition, consistent, simple, structured, strategic action until it becomes a habit. And then have something in your life to make sure that you don't lose that habit. Once you have that, then you go to the next thing and you say, all right, what's the next thing that I can be doing in order to best benefit my life in whatever area it is that I want to change? And so eventually, all of a sudden you look back at your life and you're like, how did I get here? How did I get to the point where I am this person? And it's because you created these habits and then stacked them and stacked them and stacked them. And so all of a sudden you have this giant list of habits that transform your life, and you do them without thinking about them. That is why consistency is so important. The last thing that I really want to talk with you about is this idea of willpower and discipline versus our emotional state. There are people, maybe you know David Goggins. David Goggins is definitely a willpower person. He swears at himself, yells at himself, does whatever it takes in order to get himself to take action, and he just powers through everything. There's other people I've heard talk about this concept, and they're like, it's all about discipline. It's all about willpower. Just get crap done. You know, you can do it. I try not to swear on here. That was really hard. So anyway, there's people that say that. And then there's other people that are like, be loving with yourself, be patient with yourself, get yourself into the right headspace, etc. I believe that it is a combination of the two. When you go to do something, if you're feeling great, how much easier is that thing to do than when you feel like crap? It's way easier, right? When you go to get out of bed in the morning to go to the gym, if you're feeling good and you're feeling rested, it is way easier to get yourself out of bed and to get out there to the gym. But if you're feeling sick, it's really hard. If you can get yourself into the right emotional state, it will be much easier to take action. It takes a lot less willpower to take action in the right emotional state. So learning how to control your emotional state and get yourself into a heightened, energetic emotional state, like happiness, enthusiasm, whatever it might be. Sometimes it's about taking yourself from this really down emotional state to this really aggressive emotional state, to this really positive emotional state. So, for instance, if I'm really depressed, sometimes I'll allow myself to get upset. I'll get angry. Because being in this really mellow, depressed state, it's really hard to go from there to happy and enthusiastic. But it's really easy, well, it's easier to get myself from sad, depressed to angry to I'm going to do something about it. I'm gonna make a difference in my life. So you move through those progressions. So get yourself into a heightened emotional state and work on your willpower, because they work together. The higher my emotional state, the less willpower I need. The lower my emotional state, the more willpower I need. Get both of them up there, and all of a sudden you start seeing so much more action and results from your actions. So build both. Build both. Because there's going to be days where you feel like crap and there's nothing you can do about it. And you're going to need that willpower and that discipline on those days to get yourself to take action. Consistency only happens when we're consistent. You have to do something repetitively on a schedule based on the thing you're doing. If I'm going to the gym, I need to be working out 5 days, 6 days a week in order to have the results I want. 2 or 3 days isn't going to cut it. If I'm trying to have good colon health, consistency means going and having a colonoscopy once a year, right? I know that's a terrible example, but it's the best I could come up with on the fly. The amount of consistency we need is different for different things, but recognize what consistency looks like for what you're trying to change is what I'm trying to get at. But you're going to need both. You're going to need the ability to change your emotions. You're going to need the ability to tap into your willpower. Having consistency in your life will transform your life. You may not see that it is taking place. When you go to the gym, one of my favorite people is Simon Sinek, and he talks about this. And he says, when you go to the gym and you come home and you look in the mirror, what do you see? You see nothing. And then you go the next day and you go to the gym and you come home and you look in the mirror, and what do you see? You see nothing. But you have a belief that if you are consistent and you take action and you have strategy and you keep it simple, that eventually you are going to see the results in your life. And this is true of your mind. This is true of that dream that you're trying to live out. All of those things come from consistency. Trust in the process. Have faith. I know that you can do it. I believe in you. Until next time, remember that you are not alone.